Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Channel 3 News. Today we have a very special history segment. On site, we have Drago Juxi Yukic with a live veteran from the Battle of Okinawa.
Almost 80 years ago, on April 1st, 1945, was one of the most influential and decisive battles of World War II, the Battle of Okinawa. While most people are out joking on April Fool's Day, the only living veteran of the Battle of Okinawa, Benjamin Dover, said it was no joke.
Yeah, I remember pulling up to Okinawa. Me and my boys. We were scared, but we know what had to be done.
The island of Okinawa was a small island consisting of about 466 square miles, located to the south of Japan with dense foliage and difficult terrain. It was the perfect place for Japan to make its last stand before the Allied powers made it to mainland Japan. If Okinawa fell to the Allies, Japan would soon suffer the same fate.
We were tasked with securing the air bases at Okinawa. We knew if we secured the air bases, they'd have no chance of stopping us.
The airbase and location of Okinawa would be invaluable to the United States for the planned invasion of the Japanese mainland. The island also provided a secure place to anchor battleships and organize troops for the attack.
When we were out on shore, we were all expecting a massacre. A lot of us thinking she was going to be worse than D-Day. But to our surprise, when we got there was no one in sight.
Despite both officers and soldiers expecting the beach landing to be a massacre, the Allies were met with little resistance when landing on Okinawa, and even when advancing inward, they were able to capture 2 Japanese air bases with relative ease. The early bombardment by the Navy's 5th Fleet was unnecessary, as no Japanese defense was present.
I was wondering when we were going to find some Japanese, but they were nowhere in sight.
Now, on to our special history battle analyst, Jacob Sex-Cobb-Melman.
Little did they know, Japanese troops were instructed not to fire at Allied forces, but rather to wait for them to arrive in specific locations. Japanese Lieutenant General Mitsuri Ushijima, who was commanding Japan's 32nd Army, consisting of about 130,000 men, had organized a defensive position around the Allied forces and had lured them into the perfect spot. The part of the American forces that headed to the north of the island faced opposition and suffered over 1,000 casualties, but still managed to advance fairly quickly. However, those that were sent to the south faced Ushijima's Shuri defense line, containing treacherous terrain and Japanese troops in strong defensive positions. While the land warfare was going on, Japanese command attempted to take down the 5th Fleet. On April 4th, Japan sent kamikaze suicide pilots against the 5th Fleet. Unable to successfully shoot down the pilots, the 5th Fleet suffered severe losses, with 36 sunken ships, 763 lost aircraft, and almost 5,000 casualties. Attempting to replicate this success, on April 7th, Japan sent out one of its strongest battleships, the Yamato. It was intended to launch a surprise attack on the weakened 5th Fleet and the soldiers engaged in land combat in the south. Allied submarines spotted the battleship early and notified the 5th Fleet, who launched an aerial bombardment of the battleship, sinking it and most of its crew. The progression through the Shuri defense line was slow, but the Americans managed to make their way through the Japanese bases, with both sides suffering extreme casualties, due in part to the heavy rain in the season leading to awful conditions. During this period of time, many of the battles were fought on hills and cliff sides, with the Japanese having the advantage. These included notable battles such as those at Hacksaw Ridge and Sugarloaf Hill, where forces mainly engaged in hand-to-hand combat. At the end of May, the Allied forces succeeded in taking Shuri Castle, forcing the Japanese to make their last stand at the southern peninsula.
We suffered a lot of casualties that day. I remember my best friend, Mike Oxlawn, died, got shot right between the eyes.
Believing that Americans killed any prisoners, many Japanese soldiers committed suicide rather than surrender. The surrender was helped by propaganda warfare, with millions of papers proclaiming the war was lost being dropped in Japanese-controlled areas. The Battle of Okinawa was one of the bloodiest battles during the Pacific theater of World War II. The American forces suffered 50,000 casualties with 20,000 deaths. The Japanese fared even worse, with 110,000 deaths. Since Okinawa also had a large civilian population, many of them lost their lives due to the fighting. The mainland invasion of Japan that Okinawa was essential for never occurred, as President Truman brought the war to a quick end with the dropping of the atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That will conclude our segment on Channel 3 News today about the Battle of Okinawa. I'd like to thank our special guest, Benjamin Dover, for coming in today.